It's no fun when someone looks at you and decides who you're allowed to be. Part of your story growing up has to do with, because I understand that you call yourself an advocate for marginalized people or for stories that are marginalized, and it seems like you have some experience in this arena of being marginalized and wanting to get a story out there. So tell me, what's kind of the whole foundation of this marginalized stories thing?
I'm obviously African American, but I also have SAD, which is schizoaffective disorder, which for the listeners, that is like if bipolar and schizophrenia had a baby. That is what I have. I also have ADD. So I struggle with all of those things, and in my life, I have found that doors have been closed to me. People have judged me. People have made it that, they've tried to put me in a box as to what my story should be. And I found that there are a lot of other people that have that same problem, that tend to get put in a box and told that this is the kind of story that you can have, this is the ceiling that you have. And I just wanted to create a space where individuals like myself were able to tell their stories, because I think those are some of the most important stories that need to be told. So yeah, that's my little bit of experience with being marginalized.
Sometimes the world doesn't just doubt your talent, it doubts your identity.
I think that because stories in origin are the first form of communication amongst human civilization. So when we go back to the beginning of time, we start thinking about how human beings communicated with one another, right?
Right.
We think about the caveman and around the campfire and cave paintings and things of that nature. So the idea of story has been around since the beginning, and I think in addition to story being around since the beginning of humanity, at least, there has also been that pairing with community. There's always been people. You can't have stories with it if there's no one to tell stories to, and then have those people telling stories back to you. That level of sharing stories, understanding each other's worldviews, and seeing from each other's point of view, all of that comes with story. I think specifically, no matter what the medium you're in, I think building a community is one of the most important things that you can do. Even if you're not, let's say, for instance, you don't necessarily want to make money off your art. I think everybody does, but let's say most people don't. Even in that, you still have the building that community creates opportunities, not only for yourself, but for the people that are in that community. You're building a room full of people that are anxious to buy your stuff, to hear what you have to say. And then on top of that, opening the door for them to be able to share with you, you learn more about your audience as well. So I think building an audience, I think there's a lot of talk about building an audience. And I think that building an audience versus building community are kind of two different things. I don't know if you thought about that yourself, as far as whether you're trying to build an audience or you're trying to build a community. Because building an audience, I think, is more of building a group of people you can sell stuff to, that you can share your stuff with. Building a community is a place where you can exchange your stories. Of course, they're hopefully willing to buy some of your things. They're willing to support what you're doing, but you're also willing to be open to them giving you things, telling you stories, or whatever it is that they're working on. So I think building a community should be the focus of every single creative, not building an audience, at least in my opinion. I don't know like what your perspective has been. I know you're doing this with YouTube, but how have you felt about your community or your audience? Which side do you land on?
It's really hard. I think that a community makes more sense to me because you're collaborating, you're sharing, you're helping each other, and I think there's a conversation that happens in a community, whereas if it's just an audience, it's kind of like fans versus friends. And I have put some thought into that, but the question I always run into is, how do you create the community over the audience? And I mean, especially if your audience is starting at zero and your community is maybe your family and maybe a couple of close friends, it's kind of almost hard to create a community without an audience, and it's almost hard to have an audience without a community. I don't know. It's kind of like which one comes first, and
Yeah.
what's the best way to actually chase after that. It's a question that I don't think I fully understand myself.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. There is a question. It is the sort of chicken or the egg type of situation. I for One Brilliant Arc, it was definitely community. Well, no, see what I think is I think we tried to do the audience thing first, and that didn't work. It was we were just talking. We would share content. We would make stuff, and nobody cared. And then we started actually taking an active interest in the community we got into, reaching out to Juno Jaylon. I believe she was a guest on your show before.
Yeah.
She was in DMs every single day, networking and doing things like that. I was on Reddit and different platforms, trying to bring people over and getting to know them. In fact, one of the people who works with us now, Jess Ann, who has a wonderful book, Woven in Time, that just came out last December. I found her on Reddit, and it was purely from us having a conversation about what she was working on, me taking an active interest in her, and then brought her over to Substack, and then she's skyrocketed on Substack, and then that community that led to us creating the author spotlight, which has now boosted our audience and our community. But it was purely from just having those conversations, taking an active interest in other people first, and sharing what you can in those spaces. So I guess the answer to that question would be that community probably comes first. I think in situations where you don't have anyone other than your family and friends, it feels impossible. It's like how can I get anybody? Because like your friends and your family, they care about you because they have to care about you. They have to buy your stuff. They have to they have to tell you that you're great because that's their job. But like I think community starts with being the first one to make the move. You can't wait. When it comes to being an audience, you put stuff out into the world and then you wait for people to come to you and join and be a part of your world. Being a part of a community, you make the first step. You start the first DM. You reach out on the first conversation. You make a comment on someone's post that's meaningful. You make that first step, and that's how communities ultimately build. You can't wait for your community to come to you. And I think that's kind of the difference, but I think that you'll find the most success once you start working on that, once you start working on the community.
That's it. Community doesn't show up. You build it brick by brick, DM by DM, and in-person interactions.
Exactly. And that's what I've found for One Brilliant Arc is it's really just been the more conversations that we have, the more we take an active interest in other people, that creates these relationships between us and them. And then we start having, as we've created these relationships, we start having these conversations. And as we're having these conversations, their audience starts to come and look at us and say, hey, what are they doing over there? What are they talking about? Or even people who don't know either one of us, they'll just say, oh, there's a conversation happening. Let's go see if they're saying something interesting. And then suddenly your community starts to grow because, oh, well, I have an opinion on what you guys are talking about, and I'd like to share my thoughts on that. And of course, we open the door for them to come in too. And before you know it, you have 20, 30, 40 people that are in this little group that are sharing opinions and exchanging ideas. So I think there's so much value in community building.
What kind of platforms do you think are great for doing that? Because a lot of this is probably something that we do online rather than in person. And so what have you found to maybe be one of the beginning launch points for this? Should somebody focus on YouTube or Facebook or something else entirely?
I think depending on what your medium is, the answer will be different. So I think if you are a writer, for instance, a place like Substack is fantastic. It's a place that's all about supporting writers. Everybody there wants to see everybody there win. So everybody's always, people will subscribe, sometimes people will engage, sometimes they won't. A lot of times though, even if it's just you reach out on a DM, most people will easily respond. A lot of people are willing to hop on a live and have a conversation with you. So Substack is a really great place to, one, practice your craft, because if you're a fiction writer and you want to share your fiction, you can do that on Substack. If you like to talk about fiction, but you don't necessarily want to write fiction, you could do that on Substack. If you want to talk about marketing or anything else you want to do, You could do it on Substack, and that's and maybe you're not a writer though. Maybe you like to do video. There's you can do video, you can do podcasting, whatever you want to do. There's a built-in audience that is designed to. It's built around the idea of community. So I think that's a really great place, especially for writers. I think for people who are interested in filmmaking, I think places like TikTok is actually a really good place for building community, especially if you are constantly and actively doing the filmmaking thing. So if you are working on projects and you want to share your projects, or you want to talk about what you've learned, or you want to build in public, or even learn in public, which is one of the things that I've been gearing up to try to do, or prepare to start doing a little bit more of, just learning in public, which I'd love to talk about a little bit more. But I think that TikTok's a wonderful place to do that, because it's one of the fastest ways to grow on a social media platform. Out of all the platforms, it's the fastest place you can grow, because at any given moment, your post can go, as they say, viral, and you can, have people, and it's again, hop in DMs, have conversations. Those are my two favorite places to go. I think depending on your age, sometimes Facebook might even be an interesting place to go to. There's tons of Facebook groups. So if you're really interested in getting involved in community, the best way to start a community is to get involved in a community that already exists. So there are so many groups on Facebook that you can join no matter what you're a part of. If you're a filmmaker, if you're a writer, if you like to look at bees and take pictures, there's groups on it for Facebook that you could find a community you can get involved in. So those are, like, I guess, my top three favorite platforms for getting community, building community, and starting one.
I totally get this, because I've experienced it. You spend years begging for an audience when what you really need are allies. Let's talk a little bit about story itself. So I know that you've talked a little bit about marginalized voices. Does that also mean marginalized stories? And are we talking like fiction or nonfiction?
Oddly enough, in today's day and age, where there's so much misinformation, and there's so many people who just, they don't do their homework, they don't do any research on anything, they just spew out their opinions and thoughts, that in a world where that's the case, it's interesting that, like, ironically, the one true place where you can find real truth nowadays is actually fiction. And it's like, because even in books that are, business books or biographical, you have this very specific narrative that people are trying to create, and you have to ask yourself, what is the reason behind, when we talk about things like media literacy and understanding what's behind the thing that's being created. So when you start looking at someone's biography, what's the stance that the author is taking? What are they trying to tell me? Even though it's about Abraham Lincoln, what is he trying to tell me about Abraham Lincoln? How does he want me to view the world? And then you have, and like I said, with business books, they're always trying to sell you something. So it's never fully, but when it comes to fiction, it's a master class in empathy. It teaches you how to see other people's perspectives. It teaches you how to understand character psychology, or human psychology for that matter. It teaches you to truly understand different worldviews, different philosophical views. It expands so many different things, and I feel like you can learn so much more, honestly, from a novel than you can ever learn from a textbook, honestly. And so I agree with you in the sense of, like, you learn so much truth from fiction. So I love that. That's one of the things I love about storytelling and fictional storytelling in general. So much in the last year, purely from the conversations that I've had with our clients, that I've had with my team, and just those types of conversations, being in the rooms where those kinds of conversations have happened, has made me a better storyteller in general. So yeah, I think another thing you can do, and I mentioned this earlier, is we live in the content creator era, where you can YouTube, where you can TikTok, where you can Patreon, and you can say, hey, look, I want to be a filmmaker, and I don't know how. I don't know how to direct. I don't know how to make a thing. So I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to go and I'm going to try stuff. And then I'm going to put it online This is me learning how to do this thing. And people buy into that. People buy into the support of like, hey, you're learning how to do that. Or maybe you want to be an author and you're like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing, write with me's. I go live and I do a write with me. You can see how it comes out. I'm learning. You can give me advice. And that builds that community we're talking about. And then, of course, from there, people start to buy in. And then when they watched you build that novel, they watched you work on that film. And then suddenly when that thing's coming out, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna go and watch that. I'm gonna go and buy that book because I saw it from the beginning. So we live in an era where documenting your journey, documenting your learning is another form of monetizing and growing both as an artist, but also as a entrepreneur as well.
That actually goes back to the whole power of story, because in that you're sharing your journey, which is in essence a story. You're showing them the beginnings, the middles, the ends.
Exactly.
And I think there's power in that, like we had talked about earlier. Story isn't entertainment, it's identity training.
I think the most rewarding thing is that when you share your story, I think it's the same answer. It's the vulnerability. It's the moment that you put something that's your heart and soul out into the world, and not just somebody, of course you get the people that say it sucks, but that one person that tells you, that story changed me. That story meant something to me. That story resonated with something I dealt with in my life. And when you share somebody says that to you, it's like they see you. They don't just see your story. They don't just see your character. They're seeing right into you. And I think that there's nothing more fulfilling in this on this earth than being understood. So I think that's the most rewarding thing.
But when someone finally gets it, when they see the real you, that's the moment we're all chasing.
Do not let other people dictate your identity. I think a lot of times people think, I'm not a creative, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm not an author if I haven't published a book. I'm not a filmmaker if I haven't done this. Or if I haven't got an award, or I haven't done that. Like, no, you're a filmmaker, you're a writer, you're whatever, if you're doing the thing. So do the thing, and you'll be that thing. So don't let anyone define you. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. I believe in that wholeheartedly. I think a lot of times we get very overwhelmed with all the things that are out there. You start thinking about, how do I make money? How do I survive? How do I make this book? How do I do whatever? And you get so overwhelmed with all that, and you don't know where you're going, and you just do nothing. That analysis paralysis kicks in, and you do nothing. But if you learn to just sort of start where you are and then use what you got and doing what you can, you'll find that you get where you're going a lot faster than you might think.
If the world won't make space for your story, build the world that will. That's what Jared did, and that's what every creative has to decide. Who gets to define you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support this channel by buying and reviewing my books. And don't forget to check out this other video. You might like it.